Hi, I'm Ted Wallingford, and I write for Download Squad and also for Signal to Noise, which is my blog. Today we're going to talk about using Global Positioning System, GPS, on the N95 and on the Nokia N800 Internet tablet. There's great solutions for GPS mapping and tracking on both of these devices, and I'm going to show you how to set them both up and use them. Now, before we get into the N800, I just want to give you a quick overview of GPS on the N95. Unlike the N800, the N95 has built-in GPS receiver hardware so that it can be pretty much carried around wherever you go without the need for a separate receiver like this. And that's pretty handy. The other cool thing about the N95 is that it has built-in support for Wi-Fi. It's actually a VoIP phone. It's got SIP support in it too. But what the Wi-Fi does for mapping is it allows you to download maps as you move into different areas of the globe, which is really, really handy, because trying to set up, with the limited amount of memory that's available on a device like this, trying to set up maps along a track or route is kind of a pain, as we'll discover on the N800. So the N95 will automatically download maps from Nokia's map repository. Very handy. And the resolution and quality of the maps is also very cool. So let's take a look at that real quick. Now, the GPS mapping application on the N95 is accessible right off the main menu on the main welcome screen. And the first thing that it tries to do is get a GPS fix, which you can see here. It's zooming in on my location there on the south shore of Lake Erie. I like how the key, the distance key at the bottom scale, zooms along with the map. That's pretty cool. With the N95, you can switch from a 3D view, which is sort of a 45-degree slant view, like an aerial view, back to a 2D view. Pretty neat. And then the 3D view of the map also supports cruising around, so you can rotate and zoom in and out and kind of get a better idea of the landscape in the 3D view. Ultimately, you'll probably spend most of your time in the 2D view, though. So that's the N95. To be honest, I think the N95 is really cool in a pinch, but if you want to do serious mapping, serious GPS tracking, especially with a vehicle, the N800 is the way to go. So let's take a look at that. Now, to do GPS tracking and mapping on the N800, you basically have two options. One of them is a commercial software product called Navicore. Navicore actually makes a whole kit for the N800, which includes an automotive mount and a GPS receiver like this one from Nokia, and a piece of software with all the map data and so forth built into it that you install on the N800, and that's a great solution. And there's a number of things that Navicore does which are exclusive to Navicore. But we decided that we wanted to be hackers and do it with open source software, namely a package called Memo Mapper. And that's part of the Memo project, which is sort of a project to port a whole bunch of Linux software over to the Nokia N800 Linux platform, which is sort of a Debian cousin, if you will. Now, the first piece of gear that you need to work with the N800 for mapping purposes is a GPS receiver. This here is a Nokia GPS receiver, which I received from Nokia. It's very small. Inside the unit there's a battery, which you can find by removing this front plate. I'm not going to do that right now because it's kind of a pain to remove and put back on. And then there's a couple of LED indications which flash periodically at the top of the device. One of them indicates whether or not you have a good GPS fix. Another one indicates whether or not you have good battery level. The charger that's included with the GPS unit is an automotive charger, which only makes sense because these devices don't do you a whole lot of good while you're indoors, because typically you're not moving a whole lot when you're inside a building, and therefore you don't need to track your GPS position. So they give you an auto charger, and this thing will run just fine on the charger. With you don't have to disconnect it from the charger in order to use it for tracking or anything like that. You can just leave it plugged in. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the same GPS receiver that Navicore includes in their commercial GPS kit. So you've purchased this from Nokia, and you can use it with Memo Mapper, which is the mapping software we're going to use today, or you can use it as a part of the Navicore kit. Either way, I believe it is the same receiver. So the Nokia GPS receiver uses Bluetooth to communicate with the N800, or you would assume you could use it to communicate with other devices too. I haven't had a chance to try it with my MacBook Pro yet. Obviously, there's no need to use a receiver with the N95. That's the other phone that we looked at earlier. So, how do you connect the GPS receiver to the N800? Well, it's pretty simple. You don't have to set it up with Bluetooth pair the way you would with another Bluetooth device, because the GPS receiver itself has a fixed Bluetooth password of 4 zeros, and the mapping software knows how to recognize it and puts the 4 zeros in so that it can pair up automatically. So there's no need to go in and add the Bluetooth device into a Bluetooth pair. Alright, to get started with the N800 GPS, the first thing you want to do is get yourself a copy of Memo Mapper. The quickest way to do that is to add the Memo software repository into the application manager on the N800. If you go into the N800's menu and you select Application Manager, there will be a spot where you can put a URL, and that URL will get you into the repository that contains Memo Mapper. Refresh your application list, download and install Memo Mapper through the Application Manager, and that's basically the first step you have. The next thing you need to do is locate maps. And I had a really hard time finding a stable map repository to use with Memo Mapper. Ultimately, what I did is I ended up downloading a bunch of Google Earth maps from Google's repository and installing them on my N800. And that actually ended up being a much better solution, because I intend to use the N800 when I'm out of Wi-Fi range and won't be able to just download maps on the fly, which Memo Mapper does support. But obviously ubiquitous Wi-Fi is still a ways off, and so if you're driving through the Grand Canyon, good luck getting a Wi-Fi connection to automatically download maps. Okay, now that would be one situation where the N95 makes more sense, because it can automatically download and update its maps using the cell network. Obviously the N800 isn't a cell phone, and it can't talk to the cell network without using Bluetooth connectivity, and that's a whole different story. So let me show you how to populate your N800 Memo Mapper application with maps, and actually also satellite images too. With a little bit of trickery, you can switch back and forth between aerial satellite images and actual street maps. The Memo Mapper application stores a local cache of the map images, which are just basically tile bitmaps at various zoom levels, in a folder in your profile on the N800. It's under My Images or My Documents or something like that, and then there's a Maps folder under there that Memo Mapper creates. What you can do to enable the use of both satellite and street map images is create two subfolders in that Maps folder, one called satellite and one called street map or something like that, and then go into the preferences of Memo and periodically change the target of that cache folder setting so that it's looking at one folder or the other one. Not the most elegant thing in the world, but it will switch you back and forth between satellite images and maps or street maps. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we need to locate some imagery and some map tiles. And a really easy place to find them is Google, because Google has a whole online repository of map stuff because of Google Earth, their mapping product that they make. So, how do we do that? The first step is to get your hands on a piece of Windows software called WinMapper. This is a program that will allow you to search the Google Map repository by city and state, or city, state, zip, country, and automatically download a grid of tiles at various zoom levels to your PC based on the latitude and longitude that's calculated for that city and state search that you give it. Okay, so what this does, this WinMapper, which is also known as Memo Mapper Helper, it's going to let you provide a city and state as a search term. You can go into the search window, enter the city and state, and then click search, and it'll come back with a list of potential matches. Now what happens when you select one of those matches is it's going to feed the latitude and longitude of that city into the download criteria, and it'll go out then and it'll get a matrix or an array of all of the map files within that lat-lon region. Now this method is really preferable to trying to use the automatic download feature of Memo Mapper, which I found to be quite problematic. So again, this app is called WinMapper. I happen to be running it on Parallels, and it seems to run fine there. Once the files are downloaded, you can go into your user profile in Windows there, wherever your download path was set up, and actually browse into the file structure, which is folders, the top level folders being the zoom levels, and then actually drill down into the various latitude, longitude tiles that make up the images that you've downloaded. In this case, we're looking at the satellite images, the bird's eye view images for the area that we downloaded. Now the map URI is where I just selected Google Street, is how you distinguish what you want to download, whether you want to download street data like map information or the actual satellite bird's eye images. And now we're browsing into the folder where the information was stored, and there will be a new folder here now called Google Street. And you can see there that now we have a complementary set of street maps in addition to satellite images. So the next step is going to be to get these image files or tiles moved over to the N800 and set up for Memo Mapper so that we can use them there. So I don't recommend using Bluetooth file exchange if you're using a MacBook Pro or a Macintosh because it just doesn't work right with the N800. But we still have to have a way of transferring these tile files from the computer over to the N800's cache folder for Memo Mapper. So what I did on my MacBook Pro is I went ahead and turned on Bluetooth file sharing on the MacBook Pro, dropped the folders containing the tile files into my public Dropbox folder, which is shared through Bluetooth, and then went ahead and just browsed to that share using the N800 file manager and copied the folders down into the N800. Okay, so once you've downloaded those WinMapper files, all the tiles, just copy them to your Dropbox, or if you're using Windows, copy them to a Bluetooth share, and they'll be available for browsing. So here's Memo Mapper running with the files that we got from the Google repository. Now keep in mind those map files are copyrighted, so I'm not necessarily condoning this use of those files, but you should probably proceed with caution when using these files outside of Google Earth. So here we are zooming in and out. The navigational controls for panning and zooming the map on the N800 are actually pretty handy. The directional controls on the top of the N800, which are normally used for volume control, are used for zooming. Okay, so I went ahead and told Memo Mapper to use the satellite folder instead of the street map folder. And now you can see we're zooming in on the satellite image, aerial image view instead of the street map view. So that's pretty cool. We can get both kinds of images just by switching to a different folder. So now it's time for the real fun. Now that the application is working, we're going to take it to the vehicle and do some real-time GPS tracking and some routes and stuff like that.